What's going on, guys and gals? This is Autotech, and today we're going to be installing a SpeedoHealer on a 2021 Honda CRF300L Rally. That is a really long name, so we're just going to call it a 300 Rally. The reason that we have to do the SpeedoHealer is because I upgraded the sprockets. I went from the factory 1440 to 1345. So the speedometer is quite a bit out. Not a huge deal if you don't care about your speedometer and the fact that it's like racking up a bunch of extra miles and that your speed is roughly 11% quick. That's up to you. SpeedoHealer does actually carry the kit, and you will need part number SHV4 and SHH08. They don't list it readily on their website. I had to email them, and they just told me what parts to order. So getting right into it, unfortunately there is a little bit of disassembly, nothing too terribly challenging. You're going to need a 6mm Allen, and you're going to take out these two bolts right here. Now I do have a luggage rack on this, so it's yours. If you don't have a luggage rack, you'll just have these two bolts and they'll be much shorter. Yeah, unfortunately there's no quick release for the seat, so you just need to pull out these two bolts and then your seat will lift right up. So unfortunately for me, I'm unable to lift the seat up because of the collars that are on this luggage rack. So I'm going to have to just pull this luggage rack completely off. Not a huge deal, it's only 4 bolts. So I'll check back in with you once I get this luggage rack off. Alright, luggage rack is off. So now you can kind of slide the seat back a little bit, and the seat has popped right off. The only reason I'm really taking the seat off is because I kind of want to mount the module just kind of back in here so that it's out of the way. Otherwise, if you don't really care, you probably could just mount it underneath this panel or something like that. Now that you got your seat off, you're going to just use a small screwdriver, push in the top of this pin, and then just using your fingers, you will be able to pull that out. And to reset this, you just push it back through so that it's like that. Then you will have a 5mm Allen down here. Alright, to remove this panel, it's got a couple of little push pins in it. So you're just going to go ahead, pop that out, and now that panel is off. So now, unfortunately, just the way that they've overlapped these panels, you kind of need to get this one off. So unfortunately, we'll have to take this one off first, then we can take that side one off, or maybe we'll have to take the skid plate off as well. I don't have the service manual, so we're just going to kind of take our time. But to get this panel off, it looks like it is just 1, 2, and 3 5mm Allens. And so of course there's more. You've got a Phillips right here, another push pin right here, and what appears to be 2 more Phillips right there to hold the wires, and then another push pin up at the top there. Jeez. Alright, so this thing is all one big annoying piece. So you can get that piece free, but then it's actually like bolted right here. So we're gonna have to take this off as like an entire assembly, unfortunately. So it's looking like we'll have to do these 2 5mm Allens. But first, it's kind of looking like we're gonna have to drop this skid plate off. So I'm hoping it's just gonna be these 4 bolts, and then this front skid plate will come right off. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead with these 4 bolts, and then I'll check back in with you. So definitely don't be just pulling and ripping and tearing, because this is all kind of interconnected. And it turns out we may not have had to have taken this this little Phillips out, which whatever, that'll be easy enough to put back in once I've got the whole panel off. Okay, so for the skid plate here, or that front bash plate, it's just those 4 bolts, then it kind of like falls right forward, and as you can see there's these little hooks that kind of slide into that. So this one actually wasn't too bad to remove. Hopefully this kind of shows up on the camera here, but it looks like there's nothing else that bolts it to the bottom. It looks like it just kind of hooks into that lower skid plate. So yeah, we'll go ahead, get these 2 5mm Allens out, and then we should be able to just lift this entire assembly off. Okay, so as soon as I undid those bolts, this thing's basically ready to fall off here. So yeah, we're just gonna lift that up. Don't forget that for these two back bolts here, the bolts had a little bit of a rubber washer on them. So just remember that those are the only two that are different. And like I was saying to you, if you accidentally took out that Phillips screw, we'll just go ahead and put that back in right now. So then that makes your life a little bit easier for when it goes back together. And for these ones where I thought you had to remove them, they're actually like a very bendable metal. So I was able to just hook my fingers in behind the fairing, tweak these up, slip the wires past, and then when you put the wires back in, you'll clamp those down. Okay, so now comes the fun part. This will probably be the worst part of this entire job. Behind this bunch here, there's a blue connector. I can't really get the camera in such a way that I can see it, but if you kind of come underneath here, well, maybe you can catch a little hint of it. That blue connector is what we need to undo. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and see if I can just kind of get some of these wires up out of the way so then I can get that connector undone. I don't think removing the tank will give you any access from the top. I don't really feel like trying to remove the air box because it looks like it's part of the battery tray and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to see if I can get some of these wires out of the way, remove some of the zip ties or something like that in order to get at that blue connector. For these factory type zip ties, you don't have to actually like cut them, and don't cut them because you want to reuse these ones. You can just kind of lift up on this tab and then it'll actually undo. For like the ones that I had installed for the battery tender, yeah, I'll probably have to cut those unfortunately, but I'm gonna spend a couple minutes, play with this, see if I can get some of these wires out of the way, and then I'll show you what I did. All right, so I'm gonna hold the camera in my hand and hopefully I'll be able to show it. I unplugged this module, which I think is the throttle body. So I took this connector off of it. And then if you can see in there, you can see that blue connector. So then I was able to work this one out of that little holder that it was in. And then just being patient and using my fingers underneath here like this, I was able to actually like push down through here to unclip it. And then between the two fingers, I was able to like kind of walk it off and then work this up into there. So now what we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna want to reconnect that connector, and then we're gonna wanna turn on the ignition and spin the back wheel and see if the speedometer works. All right, so I'm still gonna just hold the camera here. So yeah, you turn the ignition on, watch your speedometer, give your back wheel a good spin. All right, so it looks like I successfully disconnected the speed sensor. So we're gonna go ahead and turn the ignition back off, and then we're gonna come down here and find a nice spot to route all of that. I was thinking, because the seat kind of sucks to remove, but this side panel is actually fairly easy to get off, I was thinking maybe that's the direction I would go and see if I can route all the wires through here. It's going to be a little bit of a chore to get that jumper connector in here. I'll show you what I mean once I bring it over to the bike here. Okay, so this is what I mean about the jumper harness. Basically, this one plugs into the factory harness, this one plugs into the sensor, and then this white end plugs into the actual module. Now, passing these two connectors through that little hole really isn't going to be the simplest option. So I'm almost thinking I'll feed the small end through, run it along the factory wiring, kind of behind the frame here, and then I can have the box in here. Then it's just a matter of getting these two plugged in, and then then I can kind of tuck this back in there the way that it originally was. Now, I would recommend putting a little bit of dielectric grease just on here to help seal it. This is a dual purpose bike. I don't swamp it by any means, but I do ride through mud, I ride through rain, that sort of thing. And whenever I undo connectors on any of my bikes, I always just put a little bit of dielectric just to help seal them, because this was a little bit of work to get at that. So you kind of want to make sure that it's a quality install, so that you know, a year from now your speedometer doesn't stop working and then you've got to go and find out which connector it is that has the moisture in it. Just something to keep in mind, like while you're doing all of this, just be patient. You know, sometimes it can be tough. Sometimes you don't have it routed quite the right way. Don't rush it. Don't get mad and start reefing on stuff. Just kind of take your time and work it through. I'm going to do a test fit of that module in here. Like, none of these are really bolted down. So I think that the module would actually just Velcro, because it comes with like a dual-sided Velcro. So I'll be able to like stick it in here, or maybe I'll even be able to stick it up on top there. Either way, I think that this area would be the best so that I can access it without having to remove the luggage rack and the seat. All right, so it actually wasn't too terribly bad. I decided to undo these two connectors just to get them out of my way, like while I'm screwing around with this. So just be careful that you don't lose them down into wherever that goes. So I've got the two connectors right here. It's going to be a little bit of a fight to kind of work them through. I think I'll try and plug the sensor in first, then get the factory harness plugged into that, pushed back in there. Then I ran the wiring along with the factory harness, and then I kind of went behind the frame and came out with this bunch of factory wires. Now, I'm not going to leave this like this. I'm going to wait until I get the module in there, then I'll kind of clean this up. But I think first things first, I'll get the sensors plugged in and kind of pushed back in there, get this wiring back in there, and then I can kind of work my way towards the module and deal with like this extra little bit of wiring once the actual module is in there. So like I said, a little bit of patience, you'll be able to get your fingers in there. It's not very, like, I don't know, it's super tight. Like, that's just kind of a Honda thing for some reason. Like, they just pack everything in there so tight. Okay, just to check back in with you guys, I was able to plug in the sensor, plug in the factory harness. The two connectors kind of stayed right where they should. So then I just reconnected this, pushed this back in where it was, and then it kind of like tucks those connectors away. I then ran the wire, zip tied it once here, and then I kind of ran it along the factory harness and zip tied it again there. And then now I've kind of run it with this factory stuff. This isn't connected to anything, so that'll just flop right out of there. And then same deal with this. This one isn't connected to anything. For this fuse box, which was just sitting on top of this peg, all you do is take a flat blade screwdriver and kind of slide it between, so you go like right down in here, and then you'll be able to twist the screwdriver just a little bit and then pop this up. So now this is out of the way. So now what I've done is I've plugged in the actual module, and I'm just kind of like test fitting it, just to make sure that it will actually like fit there. With how long they've left that lead, like I basically have to have this like right against the actual subframe, or I don't know, whatever this plastic is, the fender. I'll have to have that basically like right against there. So they've got another thing to connect to it, so I'm gonna plug that in. Making sure to put dielectric grease on both of those so that there's no chance of water getting in there. And then I'm going to kind of just seat the module down. And if you remember earlier, I was mentioning that they do have Velcro on it. So when you're ready, you peel this off, stick it down. But I'm going to make sure I have both wires connected, because you won't be able to unplug it. And personally, yeah, it's got Velcro, you can lift it up, but I'd rather just put it down the once and be done with it. So that other thing that I was talking about that plugs into the module, this is your call. Depending on what you're using the bike for, what you're doing, this is like your mode switch button. So you can have two programmable modes. So you can have like A, which will be 11% or minus 11%, like what I'm going to do. But then let's say you also had a set of sumo wheels. So now you've got smaller tires, maybe a bigger rear sprocket. You could then program in a B mode. So like, let's say that's minus 18% or something like that. So if you want to, you can run this switch to somewhere that is accessible. So then when you quickly swap your wheels, you know, you reach under there or wherever you want to put it, and then you can engage the B mode. I'm not going to be doing that. So I'm basically just going to bundle this all up and leave it underneath all those other wires. I'm going to try and make it so that the switch is in a way that it can't hit anything. Your call. I kind of wish that they actually offered an option where it didn't have this, because I really don't want to leave like an unused port on this module. Like, I want it to be sealed up. So that's what you have to plug into it as well. Just thought I'd point that out to you. If you want to run it somewhere up to your handlebars or whatever, now would kind of be the time to do it. All right, so you're going to push and hold the select button, and then you're going to turn your ignition on. And anything except a number is supposed to show up. So right now we've got a T. And then what you do is you rotate the wheel, and as you can see, it actually works. And you know it works because it's flashing. And then if you go to the speedometer, okay, so the speedometer is reading just some random crap at the moment. Then to exit it, I believe it was you push select again. So now it's out of the test mode. Speedometer is showing 0. So then you can spin this, and the speedometer is reading correctly again. So the install is correct. So now what we're going to do is we're going to program this in. Now the easiest way to get your calibrations is you can just download the SpeedoHealer app. You don't have to keep it on your phone or anything like that. You just download it, enter in your stuff. So I'm going to go compensate for factory error, no. Then I entered the factory size sprockets, which was 14 and 40. The current size sprockets are 13.45. Then it just asks you the rear tire size. It's coming up with I need to go negative 17.5%. If I did go compensate for factory error, it's going to go negative 21%. Now, I don't care if it's, you know, back to factory, so I'm probably just going to enter this thing in at minus 18% and leave it alone like that. All right, so now to program this thing, it's going to be a series of buttons. So starting with the ignition off, you're going to push and hold both of them, turn the ignition on, and you're going to hold it until the L is illuminated. So now the L is illuminated, it's showing the negative sign. So to toggle the sign, press the set button. If the sign you set is negative, you will program 3 digits. So press select to proceed to the first digit. And then you will enter, how does this work here? You need to enter all digits, including the leading zeros. So you would enter 7.5 if you wanted negative 7.5%. So since I want 18%, I'm going to go negative, 1.8. So I would go, 180. All right, press set repeatedly until the desired value is shown. So I'm going to go 1, 8, 0. All right, there we go. So, all right, there we go. So it showed me A is minus 18%. So there you have it. That is programmed. That's a little bit finicky. Sorry about that. I haven't done this since like the FZ09, so I kind of had to like refresh myself a little bit there. I'm sure you could read through that a little bit better. But let's see what happens here when we rotate the wheel now. Okay, so it still reads everything like that, but now I find I have to spin it a little bit harder in order to get it to actually work. Turn the ignition off. All right, so now I'm gonna kind of tuck all these wires in on top of that, put the factory stuff back on, and then there you have it. We will be done with that section of it, and we'll get the bike back together. All right, so I was able to bundle everything up, zip tie it together, pack that in there, put the factory wires over top so it kind of all holds that down. Nothing that will touch these buttons, and then I made sure to zip tie this button a little bit up and out of the way just so that nothing can touch it. So that's all installed now. All right, so now comes the fun part of trying to reinstall this nicely. So what I did was I made sure to have 2 bolts somewhat readily accessible with a little dab of blue on them. I just always like to put blue Loctite on everything. And down here, you're going to hook that like that. And then you're gonna line this up, sort of, making sure to get those wires back underneath there. And then we're gonna make sure we're behind the radiator guard. And yeah, we're basically just gonna kind of work it ever so gently. I don't know what is holding me up here. Oh, it's the radiator guard. Okay. So yeah, make sure that you're not catching that radiator guard. And then just slowly work this thing back up into place. And then what you're going to do is I'm just gonna start like this bolt, which is why I've got this here like this, and just get 2 of those in there, and then yeah, we'll check back in a second here. So now before you go ahead and tighten down any of these, just kind of get them started, and like get all of them started, and make sure that you're not pinching the actual plastic with the collar on this bolt. And don't forget that the 2 with the rubber washers are right here and right here. So get all of them started, and then you know, if you have to shift the panel just a touch so that you're not pinching it with that collar, because if you crack the plastic, then you're pretty well screwed from there. Like, it only gets worse as time goes on and as the wind starts hitting it and stuff like that. And before I tighten all those bolts, I'm going to go ahead and put these push pins in there. So the way that you do that is just push it in, make sure it's seated, and then press that center section, and then it'll lock it in place. And then the other one was right here. Hopefully that's showing up on the camera. It probably isn't, because it's always tough to get an angle like this. But okay, so there we go. That is in there. So now that I've got those 2 push pins in place, I'm basically just going to start at the back here, making sure I'm not pinching the actual plastic. Get this touched down. I don't have the actual service manual per se. However, it is just a plastic piece. So, you know, something like 50 inch-pounds will be more than enough, plus the little bit of blue Loctite. When it comes to securing these panels, you're not reefing on it. It's just a tiny little bolt, keeps it in place. So go ahead, tighten up all the other bolts for this panel. So now moving on to this panel here, don't forget that there's those 2 little push pins. That one, and then, oh geez, I screwed up a little bit here. We're gonna pop that back out. So don't forget to tuck that behind that one like that. And then you're gonna do the push pin, which is right there and there. So then you take that clip that you had to reset, put it in there, and then you're going to put in your bottom bolt here and just snug that down. So something that just crossed my mind was the whole purpose of putting the module inside here was so that I wouldn't have to take off the seat in order to get this panel off if I needed to access that. However, how am I going to get this push pin if the seat's still on it? Whatever, I guess. So I guess it's your call. If you want to mount it under here, it's going to be the same amount of work anyways. you know, I don't know, maybe you could like pivot it out so that you could access it. Either way, I just thought I'd point that out so that later on you're not just like, oh, wait a second, I thought I was going to be able to get this panel off without taking the seat off. Oh, now we're getting into the skid plates, and it's got these nice little, I don't know, tabs to line up. So basically you're just going to, how do you do that? You're going to slide that in like that, sort of. Just going to need a little bit of persuasion, I suppose. Oh, no, there we go. There we go. Come on now. There. All right, and then once again, make sure you got your bolts readily accessible. We're going to throw those 4 5mm Allens in, and make sure you have a little bit of Loctite on them, and yeah, we'll get the 4 of those cinched down. All right, so the seats on these Hondas can always be a little bit tricky. I don't know why they make it such a stupid design. You basically have to line up this little like T-tab in your seat, and then you've got these 2 tabs that slide into this part of your seat. So sometimes it can be a little bit finicky. You know, you gotta like push down in the front. Okay, there we go, I got it that time. And then you gotta make sure that this is on the inside of the red. And so now you would throw those 2 bolts back in, torque them to 10 Newton meters. I'm gonna have to put my luggage rack back on, which has a couple of extra little washers. So I'll just check in with you once I get my rack set on, and then we'll tighten the bolts. So rather than 10 Newton meters, we're gonna torque these to 100 inch-pounds, which is just shy of 10 feet. If you are a Newton meters person, that's basically like 12 Newton meters, 13 Newton meters. Yeah, they're not like, I don't know, like it's not like a structural piece or whatever. So 10 foot-pounds would be plenty, 100 inch-pounds. Okay, sorry, so go 100 inch-pounds or 10 foot-pounds, somewhere in that range. So go, you know, 100 to 120 inch-pounds, and you'll be just fine. All right, there you have it. Sorry the video was so poorly done. Basically, I've never taken this bike apart before. There's not really much out there for work instructions. The service manual isn't available yet. So this was kind of a guessing game. Hopefully it helped you to find that speed sensor connector and showed you a good idea for where to mount that module. Just remember, this is only needed if you're going to do like tires, gearing, that sort of thing. Otherwise, if you know you just bought the bike and you're just going to ride the bike, just go for it. Once you get all this done, obviously the best thing to do is to double check. Like if you've got a handlebar mount, you can use the GPS, confirm that you're relatively close. If your speedometer is still just a touch fast, that's probably better than a touch slow. Keeps you out of trouble in theory with the local law enforcement. Otherwise, what I'm going to have to do, because I don't have a handlebar mount, is I'm going to have to just ride with a friend. My girlfriend has the exact same bike as this, so I can compare it with hers, and as long as I'm within, you know, super close, I'll be happy, because I don't really feel like tearing back down into that piece there. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you're new to this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for taking the time and watching.